If your investigation into a shady, insane asylum turned into a deadly game of hide-and-seek against the twisted patients and terrifying experiments that lurked within its walls, what would you do? Behind these doors waits a disturbing tale of science fiction gone horribly wrong. Full of encounters with giant madmen, former executives turned sadistic surgeons, ghostly apparitions, and evil researchers who created them. It's up to one freelance journalist to finally expose the truth. I hope you brought some extra batteries for that camera, because we're here to break down the mistakes made, what you probably should do, and how to survive the Murkoff experiments in Outlast. This reporter is about to crack the case of a lifetime, but only if he can survive long enough to tell the tale. It's late at night somewhere far out in the desolate mountain ranges of central Colorado, and freelance journalist Miles Upshur is winding his way along a dark dirt road. As he turns a corner, an enormous and creepy as hell building suddenly comes into view, and an overgrown sign on the side of the path confirms that he's reached his destination, the Mount Massive Asylum for the Criminally Insane. He's there to investigate a tip from an anonymous employee claiming that the facility's new owners, the Murkoff Corporation, have secretly been conducting deadly human experiments on the patients there. But it's safe to say that he has no clue what he's about to get himself into. Grabbing his trusty camcorder, he makes his way through the unlocked gate and up towards the main entrance, where he catches a glimpse of a shadowy figure that seems to be watching him from one of the windows. Unlike the front gate, the main entrance to the building is locked up tight, so he decides to circle around and find another path inside. After parkouring his way up some scaffolding, Miles goes from trespassing to full-on breaking and entering when he climbs into the building through an open window on one of the upper floors. But that was his biggest mistake. Inside, he immediately notices some very clear signs of trouble, with puddles of blood covering the floor and piles of furniture thrown haphazardly around the room. For anyone else, this would be their cue to turn around, but Miles' journalistic spidey senses tells him that he's about to see the good shit. So he presses onward deeper into the asylum. The door ahead is locked, but there's a blood-covered vent in the break room that Miles thinks looks like a good alternative. So he crawls in there like a booger-eating kid at a McDonald's playground and pops out somewhere on the other side. With the hallway blocked, Miles is forced to cut through the library, where he's startled to find a Murkoff operative who's been brutally impaled on a large metal spike. To Miles' surprise, the man is still alive, and with his last breaths, he explains that the former patients, who he calls the variants, have taken control of the facility before finally succumbing to his injuries. At this point, Miles' timbers are thoroughly shivered, but he must keep going in the name of journalism. As he's squeezing around in an inconveniently placed filing cabinet, he's suddenly grabbed and pulled backwards by a hulking abomination of a man who makes Frankenstein's monster look like Ryan Gosling. Meet Chris Walker, Miles' new best friend for the rest of the evening. Lifting him off of his feet, Walker tosses Miles through a window and sends him crashing down into the building's main lobby, where he hits the floor and passes out. Okay, holy shit. How's that for a welcome? Let's just breeze past the fact that he committed something like half a dozen crimes just getting into this place. The important thing is that we wouldn't even be in this position if he hadn't spent the entire introduction ignoring every single red flag that it's possible to imagine. We may not know how things got so bad just yet, but I can tell you one thing for sure. Miles, you f***ed up. Okay? You f***ed up! First of all, there being no guard at the main entrance to this highly secretive corporate facility should have been a clear sign that something wasn't quite right. Miles should have known from experience that no self-respecting, shady corporation would let someone from the press get anywhere near the front door without sending their grunts to stop him. Then we pull up to the front courtyard, and what are the first two things that we see? There's a creepy guy watching from a window, which is always a guaranteed sign of trouble. But more obviously even than that, Miles must have noticed the 3 heavily armored military trucks parked directly outside. Having covered conflicts before, he should have known that trucks like that must belong to a riot control team. And whatever they're here for, it's probably a little more than Miles and his camcorder are ready to handle. We also need to consider how he got there. The asylum is located in the extremely remote mountains of Lake County, Colorado, which is mostly empty besides its single town of Leadville. This makes sense since Murkoff was trying to keep the place hidden, but it also means that there's absolutely no one around to help Miles now that he's in trouble. He's following up on a tip from a whistleblower, something that's normal enough for his line of work, but if you read the message carefully, he mentions dream therapy going too deep and something waiting for them in the mountain. And you can call me paranoid, but that's just got supernatural bullshit written all over it. Anyone with a brain could clearly see that he was walking into a death trap. And then as soon as he gets inside, we've got flipped over furniture, boarded up doors, barricaded hallways, and not to mention huge puddles of blood all over the floors, walls, and ceilings, making it pretty damn clear, if it wasn't obvious enough already, that Miles here was in serious danger. Once he peeked down from those vents and saw no doctors, staff, or anyone else in the main building besides just the inmates running around, that's the moment where you need to ask yourself, is this story worth my life? And if not, then the smart move would be to turn around while you still can. Miles here is different though. He saw all this and didn't even think about calling off the investigation until he met a whole-ass dude on a stick. That's Stevenson, the former leader of an infiltration team from Murkoff's tactical division, who was sent in with his squad to contain the incident by leaving absolutely no witnesses. It wasn't just the dangerous patients that they came here to deal with, but anyone who could tell the truth about what happened at the asylum, including Murkoff's own employees. These guys were supplied with all kinds of top-of-the-line gear, including body armor, military weapons, and tactical training. But they still got wiped out by the patients here in a matter of minutes. After seeing this, Miles actually had the audacity to write in his little diary that it would have been a good thing to hear when I could still leave the way I came. As if he didn't just get done walking straight past the most clear and obvious parade of red flags that the world has ever seen. Besides, he still could have stacked up some chairs, climbed back into that vent, and turned tail right the hell out of there. But I guess it's definitely too late for that now, huh? Well, it should be pretty obvious by now that Miles here is totally f***ed, since if the dead bodies and severed heads all over the place weren't enough to clear that up, then being attacked by some kind of giant, horrifically deformed mutant should have clued him in. You're probably wondering who that guy was, and don't worry, we'll be seeing him again in just a few minutes. But as for our intrepid journalist over here, there's only one thing left to say. Miles, you f***ed up. After crashing into the floor of the main lobby, Miles briefly passes out, only to wake up with another one of the asylum's wacky cast of characters standing over him. This time, it's Father Martin, a self-proclaimed priest with a knack for finger painting, who decides that Miles here is going to be his witness. The man is gone by the time that Miles finally gets back on his feet, but that's far from the last that we'll be seeing of this bald-headed nutcase. And with the main doors still locked tight, he has no choice but to head for the security room, in hopes of finding an emergency override. The path leads Miles past a group of harmless-looking fellows who are patiently waiting for someone to put the game on, and into an office where he finds a keycard on the body of a dead guard. So far, so good, and now all that's left to do is open the doors and get the hell out of there. But hold on, who's that on the camera? Well, if it isn't the pudgy priest himself, and hey, don't touch that lever! Ruh-roh. It looks like Father Martin here just cut the power, and now to get it back, Miles is going to have to travel to the basement. But not so fast, because there's a 7-foot freak of nature about to kick the door down. With nowhere else to run, Miles does the only logical thing and hides inside of a locker like the scared little baby that he is. And wouldn't you know, it actually f***ing works. But despite not having much of a nose left, Walker's keen sense of smell allows him to sniff out Miles' location via the fresh doo-doo in his pants. And he takes off running down into the basement, where he manages to lose the big fella, at least for now. But you know what is hard to beat? The constant dread over losing your car keys. Seriously, it's the worst. I lost my keys on a road trip last summer, and I would have rather go through a literal death game than go back to the dealer and replace them again. Luckily, thanks to today's sponsor, Car Keys Express, we can ditch the dealership and replace car keys without ever leaving our homes. Car Keys Express has this awesome new service called SnapKey. Basically, you can make car keys right from your phone. How cool is that? All you gotta do is take a few pictures of your existing key, and they'll send you a brand new one, pre-cut and ready to go. Plus, they include a super easy do-it-yourself installer so you can program it to your car in no time. Anyone can use SnapKey. It's guaranteed to work, and you can save up to a whopping 75% compared to dealership prices. That's some serious savings and some crazy awesome future technology, folks. But hey, maybe the DIY route isn't your thing. No worries, Car Keys Express has got you covered. They have technicians in thousands of neighborhoods across the states. Just schedule an appointment, and a fully trained professional will come right to you, cut your key, and program it to your car on the spot. Easy peasy. So, if you ever need a new car key, don't waste your time and money at the dealership. Check out Car Keys Express. Use my special link in the video description for an extra 10% off. Huge thanks again to Car Keys Express for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the beats. Okay, why is it always the basement? Before Miles goes and gets himself into more trouble here, I want to quickly point out a few important options that he might be missing for opening this door. Facilities like this almost always have several ways to override the electronic locks in case of an emergency. Most obviously, there should be a physical key that can be hidden in the security room or on one of the guards nearby. In many cases, these kinds of electronic locks are also integrated into the building's fire alarm system. That way, if there's a fire in the building, then the locks will automatically release for a quick evacuation. Also, a lot of these doors will have their own backup power supply so that they can still be unlocked even when the power is out, since you wouldn't want to be stuck in there forever just because of a blackout. If I were Miles in this situation, I'd try seeing if I could get anywhere with these ideas before I even considered going down into that basement. Of course, there's always the option of trying to get out through a window. The glass is probably going to be reinforced to prevent the patients from escaping, but he did just use a broken one to get in here, so clearly they're not indestructible. You never know until you try, so it could be worth giving it a shot and seeing what happens before going any further into this nightmare. Down in the basement, Miles is tasked with restarting the generator so that he can restore the facility's power. But as you might expect by now, getting it done won't be so simple. The lower level is pitch dark, flooded with several inches of water, and it's home to, you guessed it, another patient. But this guy is wielding some sort of club, and Miles can tell right away that he didn't just get lost on his way to a piñata party after hitting a couple of buttons and flipping the breaker switch, all while avoiding getting a hug from his new buddy here in the process. Miles is narrowly able to escape and slip past him, restart the generator, and escape back up to the first floor. Now it's back to the security room, and all that's left to do is open the doors and get the hell out of there. But wait! Father Martin's sneak attack! And he injects Miles with a syringe full of sleepy juice. As Miles is passing out, Martin explains that he can't let him leave until he's seen the bigger picture, and directs his attention towards some security footage of a group of Murkoff agents being sent to the Gulag by an invisible force that he calls the Wall Rider. Whatever this creature is, Father Martin seems to have formed a sort of cult to worship it. But now it's time for Miles to take another nap. Okay, well, so much for getting out of here the easy way. It looks like we're going to be spending more time in the asylum after all, so while Miles here is getting some rest, let's take a minute to discuss these two kooky characters that we've met so far, and how Miles can deal with them if and when they show up again. First, we have the priest, Father Martin Archambaud. It might surprise you to hear this, but he's actually not a priest at all. Crazy, right? The truth about Martin is that he suffers from a severe schizoaffective disorder that causes him to experience hallucinations and delusions of a higher calling, which he believes is to serve and spread the gospel of this strange creature called the Wall Rider. One thing that sets him apart from everyone else here is that Martin's new religion actually gives him a level of control over some of the other patients that he's managed to bring into his flock. Since he's not a direct threat, unlike the guy who we're about to talk about next, it might actually be better for Miles to attempt to work with him, at least for now. After all, he sees everything that happens as having some relation to his religion, and actually wants Miles to get out alive so that he can share his gospel with the outside world. So perhaps Miles can lean into this if he thinks creatively, and use his knowledge to attempt to influence the father's actions, or the actions of the patients who respect him. Maybe he'd assign Miles some loyal followers to use as meat shields if he asked, or order them to protect him if any of the other patients start giving him too much trouble. They say if you can't beat him, join him, and as crazy as it sounds, in this case, making some friends might be Miles' best shot at getting out of here alive. Now, if there's one guy who we've met so far that definitely is not a friend, it'd have to be the big boy Chris Walker. This absolute unit stands nearly 7 feet tall, and I've seen estimates that put his weight at close to 400 pounds. That's as heavy as a silverback gorilla. He could go toe-to-toe with Jack Baker if it wasn't for the mold making him pretty much invincible. And, unlike Ethan, Miles here doesn't have a secret serum up his sleeves to cancel out his powers. Or maybe he does, but we'll get back to that in just a minute. Walker here is the one who took out that entire squad of contractors and left our buddy Stevenson on a stick back in the library. But he wasn't always a dangerous criminal. Back in the day, Walker started out his professional life as a military policeman and served several tours in Afghanistan, causing him to develop severe PTSD. After returning to the States, he began to receive treatment at a clinic in Texas, which was also owned by Murkoff, and eventually became a security guard there. As his condition worsened, Walker became obsessed with security protocols, which puts him at odds with Miles, even though they both technically have the same goal of stopping the Murkoff experiments from escaping. Because whereas Miles wants to inform the public about what's happened here, Walker's damaged mind is still hell-bent on keeping Murkoff's secrets hidden from the public eye. One day, Walker snapped and went on a rampage that ended with the deaths of 3 patients and a doctor. He was finally caught and taken into custody by the corporation, but only after Murkoff agents shot him several times and even hit him with a car just to get him under control. Since he was a Murkoff employee, the company chose to cover up the incident and committed Walker to the Mount Massive Asylum, where he was used in their experiments until the breakout occurred and he was able to get free. These experiments bolstered his already considerable physical power, giving Walker near superhuman levels of strength and durability. He's strong enough to tear Miles' head off with his bare hands, and can even break through reinforced glass. Besides that, he's maintained most of his intelligence, is relatively athletic, making him able to keep up with Miles despite his massive size, and can even smell when you're around if you're a little extra stinky that day. In a fight, pretty much your only chances against him are to either hide out somewhere and wait for him to pass, or slip through a gap that he's too big to follow you through. Unless you're able to come up with some more creative ideas. From a note that Miles found while exploring the first floor, we can see that the hospital staff used chemical restraints, meaning powerful sedatives, to keep Walker under control. As Miles has just learned the hard way, Father Martin seems to have gotten his hands on a supply of these medications, and maybe he'd be nice enough to share his stash, or at least tell us where to find some more if we explain the plan, since Miles won't be able to spread the gospel anymore if Walker gets a hold of him. We also know that during his time at the Texas clinic, Walker was treated using hypnotherapy, so maybe if Miles swings a pocket watch around in front of him, then he could put the big guy to sleep for a little while, or even trick him into helping fight off the other patients. One strategy for dealing with super strong enemies like this is to use that strength against them. And since he's strong enough to break through reinforced glass, it could be possible for Miles to trick him into smashing out one of the windows and creating an exit route, either by baiting him into a charge attack and then dodging out of the way at the last second, or by making clever use of Miles's own reflection to fool him into thinking that Miles is on the other side of the glass. Finally, we might be able to use his experience in the military against Walker by making loud banging noises to scare him, or by pretending to be his commanding officer and ordering him to stand down. Most of these ideas would be risky because they require getting his attention and could easily backfire by making him even more violent. So if you're going to give any of them a try, then you better be sure about what you're doing. When Miles eventually wakes up, he finds that he's been brought even deeper into the asylum and tucked away into what appears to be Father Martin's old cell. Well, I can't be out first under these conditions, Miles thinks to himself, so he sets off through the cell block in search of an exit. The place is crawling with patients who are mostly minding their own crazy business, but it isn't long before he runs into two that are a bit, different, even for here. For starters, they seem to have misplaced their pants, but unlike the others, these two are uncomfortably calm as they discuss which of Miles' organs that they'd like to eat first. Super! These fellas are called the twins, and lucky for Miles, they decide not to kill him yet out of respect for the priest. But it's pretty clear that they won't be able to control themselves for very long. Further ahead, Miles finds a note from Father Martin written on the wall, instructing him to follow the blood. To get to the next area, he needs to pass through a locked decontamination chamber, and the hallway to the room with the override switch is currently occupied by a pipe-wielding gentleman who really hates loud noises. That should be no problem, since Miles is just passing through, but oh no! There's another patient in the security room who loves making loud noises, and the two of them immediately start chasing Miles through the halls, forcing him to circle around, hit the button, and sprint over to the decontamination chamber, where he's finally able to lose them. Phew, that was close. But at least there's no more bad guys for now. Okay, since it looks like Miles is here to stay, I think it might be time to discuss his new roommates, the patients, or as they're called by Murkoff, the variants. The name variant refers to all the different messed up ways that these patients came out after being experimented on by Murkoff. More specifically, each and every patient in this building was subjected to an experimental process called morphogenic engine, which involves a combination of extreme mental stress and chemical injections meant to induce intense lucid dreaming. We'll find out more about this later, but the important thing is that when these experiments failed, it left the patients' minds permanently altered and their bodies horrifically deformed. Each of the variants all have different levels of awareness in terms of their surroundings, and although not all of them are dangerous, some are super dangerous. So there's no way for Miles to know who he can trust. Basically, they're just always around to give Miles a good scare at best, and try to bash his head in with a blunt object at worst. Hiding works, but they're not totally obvious, and they will find you if you f*** up. Now that they've taken over the asylum, the key is to always be on the lookout for their ambushes. Miles also has the advantage in dark areas thanks to his night vision camera, so he should make use of this to avoid or get the jump on dangerous patients whenever he can. The variants are all pretty messed up from the experiments, but with the exception of Walker, most of them seem like they're more or less just regular guys, which must mean that fighting them is an option. Why not pick up a weapon? I'm not saying that he has to start gearing up like Arnold at the end of Commando here, but some kind of pipe would be good just to level the playing field, right? He could also try exploiting their fear of the Wall Rider by suggesting that he's somehow under its protection. Finally, Miles discovered a note back in the basement describing how, in one series of tests, the subjects were put into a deep hypnotic state by the researcher pointing a finger at them and saying the phrase, "You will sleep." And maybe he could use this move on the patients here. It's a long shot, but could you imagine if it worked? He'd essentially have the off switch for everyone in this place, so it could be worth a try. Approximately 5 seconds later, Miles runs into the twins again, and they say that they're starting to get hungry. That's probably not good. And then there's Chris Walker on the floor below ripping a guy's head off. Yeah, that's definitely not good. Using a keycard, Miles is able to enter the ward's shower room, where he spots a bunch of patients jumping into the sewers through a giant hole in the floor that looks like his way out. But as he's walking down the dark hallway, he's suddenly cut off by our trouser-challenged friends. Thinking quickly, Miles jumps out a nearby window and starts shimmying along the outside ledge. They decide to let him live for now. Miles enters a security room and presses another button to open the next door, when suddenly, Chris Walker attack! So up into the vents he goes. Now we're running back down the hallway and explosion! But quickly there's a helpful pile of corpses down below to break Miles's fall. Walker is still after him, but Miles uses the cover of darkness to sneak around, and he's able to shake him by crawling under a gap that the big show here is too large to follow him through. Finally, Miles makes it to the hole where he's able to drop down into the sewers. But if he thinks that he's leaving the horrors of the asylum behind him, then he's going to be in for one hell of a surprise. Okay, Miles may be having a rough night so far, but on the bright side, somehow the sewers are actually less disgusting than the asylum itself. Either way, Miles should try his best to follow the flow of water, since it always flows towards the septic tank or drainage area, and there could be an exit that-a-way. While he's down there, Miles could also check his cell phone again to see if being in the tunnels affected that jammer. It's a small chance, but it would be great if he could call for help. Now that we've gotten this far, I'm definitely not trying to get back into the asylum. If I could find another way out, I might even consider staying down there until the situation up above resolves itself. The only problem with that would be Walker relentlessly searching for him, but somehow he might actually be better than the guy that Miles is about to meet. So, now we're navigating through the sewers where Miles has an encounter with a ghostly apparition that disappears through the wall. Could this be the fabled wall rider of which the priest speaks? Yes, it is. But the good news is that it's not interested in Miles for now. That's helpful because the whole time that he's trying to find his way back up to the surface, Miles is relentlessly pursued by who else but the abominable snowman. Just kidding, it's Chris Walker. Big Boy chases him and keeps chasing him until Miles finally ends up at an exit that leads back into the male ward. That's right, this ward is for boys only, no girls allowed. But instead of kicking back with some cold brews, the boys here look like they haven't been having much fun at all. In a room full of blood-covered hospital beds, Miles discovers a note from one Dr. Traeger, who seems to be doing some experiments of his own, and claims to have killed more than 80 members of the staff. Yikes. Hopefully we never run into that guy, but we've got more pressing problems to deal with now, because after clambering through yet another air vent, Miles drops down into a room that another group of patients are using as a sort of human pantry, and they are very excited to have him for dinner. Literally. With the variants hot on his heels, Miles takes off running through the winding halls of the ward, using furniture to slow them down whenever he can, until finally, they chase Miles down to a dead end in a kitchen supply closet. This looks like the end of the road for Miles here, but just then, a helpful sounding voice on the intercom urges him to climb into the dumbwaiter at the back of the room, and he manages to escape just in time. Could this be a friend? Unfortunately not. As it turns out, he's actually the craziest motherfucker that Miles has encountered so far. Ladies and variants, introducing everyone's favorite psychophysician, Dr. Rick the Dick Traeger, live and in the flesh. Or at least what's left of it anyway. Joking, he asks Miles if he wants to leave, only to pull him backwards into an elevator which takes them up to the building's 3rd floor. This is Traeger's own personal playground, and the hallways are lined with badly mutilated patients strapped to their beds. At the end of the tour, Traeger brings Miles to a blood-covered bathroom that he's been using for his unsanctioned operations, and places his camera on the sink in front of them. Maybe he just wants to film a TikTok, thinks Miles. And he starts trying to hit that Lil Uzi dance like his life depends on it, but it's no use. and Traeger grabs a giant pair of scissors out of a nearby urinal, using them to chop off a single finger from each of Miles's hands. Okay, Traeger here is an absolute maniac. The important thing right now is for Miles to figure out if he's going to survive this. His biggest problem is that he's restrained with cuffs that are designed specifically not to be wiggled out of. Honestly, he's kinda screwed here. Ideally, he'd want to get those wounds wrapped up next, but I seriously doubt that he's going to find anything clean to use around here. The table nearby happens to be full of weapons, and I'd probably want to pick one of those up to protect myself if he catches me. But we know by now that Miles here is a pacifist, so as usual, he's going to rely on nothing but the 5 Ds of dodgeball to get him by. After relieving Miles of his digits, Traeger goes to grab something from the other room, leaving Miles alone. On the bright side, now that Miles' hands are a little bit smaller, he's able to slip them out of the restraints and escape before the lunatic returns. Making his way back out to the ward, he encounters a badly injured man who explains that Traeger, like himself, was never a patient, but instead a former Murkoff executive who got into some trouble with the other higher-ups, which is how Rick Traeger, the creepy executive, became Dr. Traeger, the Finger Taker, as soon as he's finished giving us the backstory. This guy starts yelling for the doc at the top of his lungs. Not cool, man! Not cool. As Traeger comes rushing in, Miles is forced to run for his life, hiding in the shadows whenever the doctor's around and trying his best to avoid noisy patients, until he finally finds the key to the elevator. Grabbing it, Miles dips out just as Traeger breaks down the door, circling around him and using the path that he just opened to get back to the elevator, which he boards just in time. It looks like Miles is home free when, all of a sudden, Traeger cuts him off on the second floor and rips open the security gate, lunging at Miles with his giant pair of shears. Miles fights back, and in the scuffle, the doctor ends up trapped between the elevator door and the floor outside, crushing him into Traeger juice. With the elevator stuck between floors, Miles climbs up through a service hatch in the ceiling and runs into our old buddy, Father Martin, on the other side of a door not too far ahead. He's glad to see the journalist still alive and encourages him to keep following the path, promising that Miles' job is almost finished. Alright, so now, Miles is trying to meet up with Father Martin, and he finally exits through the door that Traeger was taunting him with into a fenced-in courtyard area. While navigating around outside, Miles encounters the Wall Rider, although it leaves him unharmed, parkours across the sides of the building, sneaks around Walker a few more times, passes a fountain full of blood and dead bodies, ew, and eventually climbs back through a broken window on the opposite end of the facility into the dilapidated female ward. Okay, hold the phone. He's seriously not about to go in there, is he? It looks like the only thing standing between Miles and freedom is a few barbed wire fences from what I can see. He has access to the maintenance shed, so why not grab a tool and use it to bust out of there? Cut a hole in the fence, climb onto a shed, and jump over it. Do anything besides go back inside. The absolute last thing that Miles should be looking to do right now is go back into the worst place ever. But I guess with Walker putting the pressure on him, he decided that he just needed to get away from the big guy first, even if it meant going back inside. Still, if I were him, then I'd be trying whatever I could to not have to set foot back in that asylum ever again. Back within the walls, Miles spots Father Martin waving his flashlight at him through a locked gate, who instructs Miles to meet him somewhere on the other side. This turns into a whole side quest where there's some variant ambushes, more encounters with the Wall Rider, another visit from the twins, and an extra creepy section where Miles loses his camera, until eventually we come to a stop in a sort of theater room. The priest has set us up to watch a little informational video that's basically an audio recording from back in the 80s of an interview with one Dr. Rudolph Wernicke. Who's he? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, Dr. Wernicke here was a German scientist who switched teams over to the United States in 1949, and he's the big kahuna behind this whole Project Wall Rider debacle. The doctor explains that his project can only be successfully implemented by a test subject who had witnessed enough horror. And And although the wall rider definitely looks supernatural, he insists that its existence is entirely based in actual science. Moving right along, now that the movie's over and we know the lore, it's time to find that priest and finally get the hell out of here. Oh hey, there he is in the chapel. And wait, be careful with that candle. Oh well, it looks like that's it for Father Martin. But hey, at least he fixed the elevator. Now we could just ride it down to the lobby and oh no, why isn't it stopping? Instead of letting him off at the atrium, the elevator keeps going down beneath the depths of the asylum until Miles finds himself in, what else? A secret underground lab. Because of course there is. This is it, the beating heart of Project Walrider. And just like up above, all of the lab's personnel have already been torn limb from limb by the horrors of their own creation. Up ahead, Miles spots an open hangar door, a straight shot to the outside world. But as he's running for the exit, the Walrider cuts off his path. Terrified, Miles sprints back down the hallway and right into a big hug from his good buddy Chris Walker. This looks like it could be the end for our journalist. But just when he's about to be turned into Miles' juice, the Walrider bursts in and starts tossing Walker around like a rag doll, slamming him violently into the walls until it lifts him up and forces his entire body straight through a vent on the wall, slicing him up like ground beef through a wood chipper. That's it for Chris, but Miles' job isn't over yet. In a nearby office, Miles comes face to face with the Mad Doctor himself. Somehow he's been kept alive well beyond his expiration date, possibly due to the fact that the man controlling the Walrider, a young patient named Billy, seems to view him as a sort of father figure. Turning to Miles, the doctor explains that the Walrider is actually a physical swarm of nanomachines that are being controlled by Billy through a complex biochemical process catalyzed by his morphogenic engine. According to him, the only way to stop it is for Miles to disable Billy's life support systems and kill its host once and for all. Sounds legit to me, thinks Miles, and so he sets off to do just that. Okay, Miles is almost out of here. All that he needs to do now is unplug this guy Billy from the Matrix without being killed by the Walrider. But that's easier said than done. The most important thing is that now we've learned that the Walrider is an actual physical entity, a swarm of nanobots. Obviously, if it can kill Walker, then it could kill Miles in a fraction of a second, and running seems to be working for him so far. But being a physical thing means that it could possibly be hurt, and something that I noticed about this lab gives me an idea. All around the lab are big tanks full of liquid nitrogen. Now, liquid nitrogen is extremely cold and has a very low boiling point. So when it makes contact with the air, it instantly turns into a dense cloud of freezing cold nitrogen gas, which can cause severe cold burns or frostbite if it contacts your skin. If Miles can somehow open one of these tanks and release the gas just as the Walrider is coming by, then he might be able to freeze the nanomachines and either destroy them outright or damage them enough that he could finish the Walrider off by more traditional means, like hitting it really hard with a metal pipe. Of course, he could probably also just smash the pod that Billy is in and call it a day. Whatever it takes to finally get out of here at this point. Leaving the doctor behind, Miles takes off through the facility while narrowly avoiding attacks from the Walrider until he finally ends up in the project's nerve center, where he finds Billy strapped into a sort of matrix pod at the center of the room. The technology that he's looking at is pretty far beyond his understanding, but Miles knows exactly what he's supposed to do: pull the plug and end this nightmare for good. First, it's off to the life support fluid reservoir to turn this valve. Uh-oh, the Walrider didn't like that. Then it's a light jog up a catwalk to the sublab generator. Just unplug this cable here, alright, good. Now back down to Billy. Hit this button and, yep, he's dead. But wait, Walrider attack! And as it pins Miles to a wall high above the ground, it actually passes into his body, claiming Miles as its new host. That's probably not good, but there's no time to overthink things now. Miles picks himself up, staggers to the exit, and there waiting for him is Dr. Vernicle, along with a team of armed security guards. Suddenly, Miles realizes that he's the last loose end left to tie up, and these guys absolutely light him up before he can even react. After all of that, Miles drops to the floor, dead. But all of a sudden, the Wall Rider takes over and effortlessly tears the entire group to shreds, presumably including the Doctor himself. It looks like Miles never made it out at all, and that's the end of our story for now. But like any shady corporation, Murkoff and its experiments won't stay buried for long. But what would you do? Now, I was recently watching some videos of some kids who were like breaking into Chernobyl and breaking into the zone surrounding Pripyat and all this stuff. And they're like social media influencers who just love to break into off-limits places. This kind of reminds me of our protagonist here. He's got that dog in him, you know? He wants to share his creepy story about what's going on in this place with the rest of the world. But I don't give a shit about this place. I ain't going in there, man. Blood, dangly body parts, hell no. I've played way too much Resident Evil in my life to know that as soon as I got near this place, I'm getting the out. What would you guys do? Seriously, let me know down in the comments below. Did you enjoy the episode? I mean, it's Outlast. You guys have been asking for this episode for a while, so here you go. If you enjoyed it, check out that How to Beat playlist for other videos just like this one. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm the guy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now. Oh, wait. I meant to say, have a damn good day.